dude. Cracking the beer. It's not gonna be.
Stream ready.
Are we? Are we for once?
Hi, everyone. All right. That was actually pretty cool. Awesome. Man, that was like the most seamless, like, glide into the podcast I think we've ever had. We need to take 2 weeks off more often. Oh, man.
That's right. Whole time just practicing that.
What is up, everybody? My name's Curtis. This guy playing on his phone is John. And welcome to Player Tuesday. Guaranteed to be the internet's most okayest podcast. Here on Player Tuesday, we like to talk about three main topics: movies, tech, and video games. And we've missed the past couple weeks. Unfortunately, I got sick the week before last, and then the following week, John was sick. So we've got
Thanks,
over
Curtis.
our illness. Yeah, I know. Sharing's caring. You should be glad I shared that illness with you. You should be thanking me.
I was.
I'm sure you were. But anyway, so yes, we are over our illnesses. We are super excited to be back on stream. And well, at least I am. I can't speak for John, but
Oh, yes. I'm happy to be here. Hello.
he's here, so I'm assuming he's happy. But yeah, so glad to be back. Man, it's been a wild couple weeks. So what'd you do on your 2 weeks off besides being sick?
Well, let us see. Oh, I guess it was nothing. I played some Warframes.
Always.
Some Warframe.
Always.
Uh,
Did you wear pants? It's a question we have to ask every week. We've got to make sure John wore his pants.
You guys are so strict about these pants.
Who makes these rules?
Who is this Pants Kaiser that's constantly making me shield my nethers?
Oh, Lord. Man, this is going to be an interesting podcast.
I'm a little off today, Curtis, so it's going to be one of those.
I'm always off. That's the key. That's the key.
Right. Well, I mean, me too. I just meant exceptionally so.
But so you played Warframe. Is that it?
Honestly, it may be.
Man, lucky duck having this like relaxed couple weeks, man. Jeez.
Yeah, yours was pretty eventful, right?
Yeah, so the week I was sick, I like woke up sick Monday and then like started slowly feeling better by like Wednesday, Thursday. And that following week I hosted a D&D party. It was the first time that I actually got to... Ooh, I just kissed a microphone. Love you guys. I hosted a D&D party. It was the first time I actually played Dungeons and Dragons. It is by far the dorkiest thing I have ever done. But quite honestly, it was so much fun. To me, like, the best part is each person has like their own storyline. And you kind of meet together in this location, start your quest. Of course, it's all narrative-based. And our dungeon master is phenomenal and was like super understanding that I had never played before. So luckily his standards were pretty low for me. So there wasn't a lot of pressure there. But yeah, so really fun time. That went on for about like 4 or 5 hours on Saturday. Sunday, I can't even remember what I did. But the next week, just been doing a whole lot of planning. I've got some stuff coming up on the channel. Within the next like couple days, I should be getting my replacement coolant in for the cryo shift video I did where it messed up. We actually think that the coolant like froze or something during shipping, and that's what's messed it up. I was looking on a thread earlier today, and somebody that was using the same brand coolant, like their coolant had frozen too in shipping. So Daniel over there is super awesome. He's sending over another bottle for me to take a look at. So we were just waiting on it to warm up a little bit. But yeah, that should be in. I'll be rocking out that video. I've got another video inspired by some comments on a past video that I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be tearing some stuff apart and really like analyzing the insides of something, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, so after that, me and the wife have kicked into overdrive some lifestyle changes. I was telling John we are on a detox, so it's pretty interesting. We can't have gluten, we can't have soy, we can't have caffeine. The only meat we can eat is chicken and fish.
Can't have fun.
Can't have sugar either.
Can't have love. Can't have life.
No. All the things that make life great, you are not allowed to have on it. Just kidding. It actually hasn't been too hard. Like the first few days were hard because we felt like we could literally eat nothing. Like, I remember walking around the store with Leanna, and like we'd pick this up and be like, "Oh, nope, that has soybean oil in it. We can't have soy." And yeah, it's super limiting, but it's only 30 days, and then after that, we're going keto with our diet. Just because I'm trying to lose a few pounds here to look good on camera, and yeah, just feel better. Tired of waking up all the time like groggy and just feeling like garbage. Probably from all the Taco Bell I was eating, but that's besides the point.
That'll do it.
But yeah, so that's been our past couple weeks in a nutshell. But so yeah, over the past couple weeks, some pretty exciting stuff has happened in the gaming world. Anthem launched, or the test for it launched last week before, and some people picked it up. And after watching some streams, it actually looks like a pretty good game in general. A lot of people were comparing it to Warframe, including myself, when it first came out. And turns out it is not really like Warframe, but it's not a fantastic game, but it's not a bad game. But it got completely overshadowed by Apex. I gotta look up the name here because I'm a scrub. Apex Legends. Apex Legends is a battle royale, and basically it beats the socks off of Fortnite. Okay. A lot of Fortnite players have switched over to it just because, like, when you go to shoot somebody, they don't turn into a 20-foot tall building. Which is so annoying. I can't stand that about Fortnite.
I mean, I guess it is one of the principal. I mean, it's part of the nature of Fortnite, right? I mean, it's very much on purpose.
Hence the name Fort. But yeah, so
hi, Matt.
Oh, Matt's down in the chat. We play a lot of Warframes with Matt. He is our Warframe buddy. And yes, he just informed me that it is Apex Legends. I never claimed to be an expert. This stream is literally about a seam of our pants.
At anything, see rule number 1.
Yes. If you're ever in doubt, refer to rule number 1. Down in the video description below, we add a rule every week, so be sure to check that out. But
lower your expectations if it's too much work.
I've found in life
Scroll it.
that if you approach the cringy things with low expectations, they're slightly less cringy. Podcasts included.
All I know is cringy, so that seems to be true in my case.
My life has been like one big cringe fest. Like there's like a block like in the middle that like I just completely black out, and then
I'm constantly the guy that's not supposed to be there or not supposed to be doing that thing.
I remind him this all the time. I'm just kidding.
He does.
Oh man.
But I barely listen because I have no expectations.
Exactly. Life lessons, my friends. Life lessons.
So Apex Legends is
it's
to be
pretty
looked out for here.
pretty interesting. It's got different classes, and each of those classes kind of have abilities, kind of sort of like Overwatch.
Okay.
Another really interesting thing is it's kind of like Realm Royale in the aspect of once you die in a squad match, you basically you fall down and you have a shield in which you can defend yourself until a teammate like prevents you from bleeding out. But if you bleed out, a teammate can pick up a card that you drop, and with that card they can go to like these big revive stations and actually bring you back into the match.
Okay.
Which that's pretty interesting. That's honestly one of the things I like a lot about Realm Royale is the fact that you can be revived. So if you make like a small mistake, you're not completely screwed by it.
It seems kind of I don't know. I've never played any of these Realm Royales, Fortnite included. So, but it seems a lot like it's trying to not throw its that idea of permadeath is really just a moment, is really taboo to an extent. It's really it's something that's really cautiously moved around in the gaming world, and honestly, there's kind of trying to be it so you don't totally die when you die seems a lot just like trying to avoid the permadeath. In other words, I'm wondering if it sounds a bit like backtracking is what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
From what the point of Realm Royale is that it's a bunch of people, but you get one life, and when you die, you die.
Yeah, and like the permadeath isn't something that like really drives me away if I'm being competitive.
Sure.
Like I played some competitive Counter-Strike and stuff like that.
If you can just come back to life, then it's just a team deathmatch.
Yeah, to an extent, it's not like you.
What I'm suggesting is that death it's not the only thing. It's not the only staple of a Realm Royale, but it's really one of the main separators between Realm Royale and just a deathmatch shooter.
That's a battle royale. Realm Royale.
Sorry. Yeah. Excuse me.
Just for the audio listeners. But yeah, so and like I was saying, in a competitive aspect, like permadeath doesn't really scare me, and I don't feel like it's a team deathmatch per se because you don't automatically like your respawn is not guaranteed.
Sure.
Like you could bleed out and your squad member could not make it to the revive station. So therefore, like a lot of times it's up to your squad whether or not you get revived. And
sure, but honestly, that just sounds like a variation on team deathmatch. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's halfway between battle royale and team deathmatch to the point where it seems like instead of going full force with it, they're pulling back a little bit just because it is so polarizing, that idea of once you're dead, you're dead.
Yeah.
Plus, there's no reason to stick around till the match is done. For the most part, when you die, you'll just get out of there, right?
Yeah.
This gives some incentive to stay till it's done. I don't know if that's necessary, but potentially.
Yeah, and here, let me do this. I want to make sure we're not gonna drop any frames. We are trying something new. We're actually recording at 60 frames per second instead of 24. Just to give a little bit better experience for the people watching. But yeah, so Apex Legends, I think it's going to do really, really well. I think it was downloaded something like 10 million times in the first like 72 or 48 hours. which is incredible. It's free to play, and yeah, it looks pretty interesting. Right now, the player roster is pretty low.
Okay.
But I would suspect probably pretty rapidly that roster is going to start filling up. At least that's the way it was with Overwatch. You only had a handful of people, and now there's tons. But yeah, so I'm pretty interested in that. I'm probably actually going to download that and try it out. I feel bad. I actually bought Far Cry 5 because it was on sale, and haven't even played it. Between Warframe and wanting to try out all these other games, I was like, I'll put that on the shelf for later. But yeah.
And now that you'd mentioned before that EA is producing Apex Legends, and then of course they're also behind Anthem. They're at least publishing for them, and I
don't think they're publishing. I think they're I forgot how it's set up, but EA is involved with both of them.
Yeah, I mean obviously BioWare is the main company that's producing Anthem, but
yeah.
But anyway,
they also made. Are they the ones responsible for BioShock?
I wanna say definitely Mass Effect.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like they've got a pretty good team. I'm curious how overshadowed Anthem's gonna be when it releases later this month. But
I don't know, because I mean, if it's a battle royale, then it's nothing like.
That's true.
Now that you mention, the reason I brought it up though is that now that you mention it, it would make sense if EA is trying to get their hands in the battle royale scene as well as the third person action kind of multiplayer scene. If they're trying to stretch out a little bit and take over some of the more popular franchise titles right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. It's always good to have your eggs in several baskets rather than one.
And being that EA is that sort of, I mean, however you feel about them, they're definitely, a company that's built on competition
and paid product or paid DLC and all kinds of stuff too. So that's honestly the only thing I'm worried about with Apex Legends. Is
you can pretty much be assured that any freedom that it might start out with will potentially be overshadowed by the greedy nature of EA, if we're just being honest.
Yeah, if we're being honest here, EA, they love their money, just like any other corporation.
Yeah, they're a commercial company.
Yeah.
Redundancy intended.
But speaking of big corporations, another big piece of news I heard, it was actually today, was that Blizzard laid off several I honestly want to say it was a couple thousand people.
That's
the source I heard from, I don't know if it's an exact amount, but they refer to it as half of their team.
Okay.
The real crappy thing about this whole thing, not only did people lose their jobs, but a month later the CEO was given a $15 million paycheck or bonus check. And it's just you see this sort of thing happen a lot, especially in the gaming industry, because the gaming industry probably has one of the biggest layoff rates of any industry. And unfortunate thing is a lot of these people move to different countries. They move across country to work at these places, and then when that falls through, they have to migrate their families to the next developer that hires them on.
Sure.
And it's just it's kind of salt in the wound when you see CEOs getting great big old checks right after a big layoff. But yeah, so anything on your side? I feel like I'm talking too much. Hogging the microphone.
Because you did all the research.
I didn't do all. Well, I did a little bit.
I sat on my tuchus.
Yeah, it was like Sunday rolled around. We're like, oh, what are we going to talk about?
We had all these plans, and then we took 2 weeks off. And what do you know? Suddenly had no more plans.
Yeah. But
I was supposed to bring in my beautiful face. I failed on that front, so
yeah,
I just brought in this one.
And I'm going to say this
worked so far
on the live stream because now it's going to hold John accountable to it.
Oh, my God.
In the next couple weeks, we're going to be doing the Classic or Pass It. Oh, hey, down in the chat, Nerd How To Plays. What's up, Ace? How you doing tonight, man? This guy right here, like, I just got to take a quick aside. He is, like, the nicest person I've ever met on YouTube. Like, he leaves comments on my videos, and, like, I feel like I did a god-awful job on the video edit, and he's just like, oh, man, this keeps getting better and better. And I'm like, thanks, bro. I needed that. Ace, you're awesome, buddy. You're always welcome here. Oh, man. So.
You were holding me accountable for something?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Man.
Why did I tell him? Oh.
Man, we are, like, on top of it this stream. But, yes, I'm going to say this right now. In the next couple weeks, we're going to be doing another segment of Classic or Pass It where John watches a cult film
That's right.
that I have not seen, and I have to watch it and kind of go over what I thought about the film and all of that because I am not a movie buff, and John's slowly converting me. Let's just hope this movie was better than Barbarella because Barbarella was a hot mess.
Emphasis on the hot. No,
I was sitting there thinking, like, that was probably actually, like, bad phrasing. Jane Fonda does not look the same now in Grace and Frankie as she did in Barbarella. But,
thank God.
But, yeah, so I'm super excited. This was supposed to be a Valentine's Day movie.
This was supposed to be today's, so.
But, yeah, things happen. Life gets in the way. But anyway, are we moving on to the main segment?
I think so. It's time.
All right. I'm going to switch this over here so I can see this. Oh, dear. What'd I do? I do this every week. Okay. So, we are going to talk about Warframe this week.
That's right.
And in case you don't know, this is a game that John and I have been absolutely addicted to for the past 3-4 months.
Yeah.
I know I've clocked in at 166 hours into the game, and I've hit like the second juicy part of the main story.
Yeah. I meant to look it up before stream, but I didn't. Yeah, it's definitely been at least 200 hours, but it's I don't know. Yeah.
And John's like a good ways ahead of me. And I introduced him like a month into me playing. So like I think his addiction's a little more severe than mine, but
it pays when you're lazy, when you got nothing to do.
Who needs to play in a podcast when you have Warframe? But yeah, so did I drag over the wrong window? I sure did. Okay, there we go. All right, so Warframe, man, this is a game where people either love it or totally hate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very, very unique style game, which, John, did you want to kind of, you're better at summing up, like, what this game's about.
Well, yeah, I could try. I mean, I would say it's a sci-fi third-person shooter. Wouldn't classify it as an RPG, although there are potentially some RPG elements. Nor is it an MMO, although multiplayer is definitely a big facet of it. Well, before I do that too, I mean, some other background information. It's published by Digital Extremes.
Mm-hmm.
When did they put it forward? Was it 2014, 13,
15, I think.
Okay, I was pretty sure it was by
Yeah.
14, but I okay. I wouldn't. I'm not gonna know that.
Yeah. And should I give them a little bit of background on
Yeah,
Digital
I think so.
Extreme?
Before we jump into anymore.
So, in case you haven't seen it, No Clip, which is a documentary channel here on YouTube, did a fantastic documentary on Warframe and Digital Extremes. It's a two-parter. Both of them are about 30 minutes, but Digital Extremes is actually pretty interesting. Like, they've been in the game a long, long time. Like, the CEO started out doing shareware. So basically, like, this publication, I think it's called like Blue Disc or something, would go around and pick up like these self-made projects and kind of give them away with their copies of magazine. And this guy made a game, and like it was pretty well received. Well, then he started making pinball games, and the pinball games spread like wildfire. They were highly successful, and got to the point where they needed to make a sequel. And the guy was like, man, I really want to try something else. I don't know if I have the energy to be able to do another pinball game. And the guy said, well, why don't you hire to make your life a lot easier? That way, like, you can get more accomplished with more people. It wouldn't just be you. So thus Digital Extremes was born. And fast forward a few years, they were actually involved with, I think it was Unreal Tournament.
Really?
It was either Quake or Unreal Tournament. And yeah, they were pretty involved with that. It was them and Epic Games that were producing this. And of course, you know, those were very successful. And they started doing like little kind of freelance for hire contractor kind of jobs. They would help people make their games, and they did pretty good with that, but they really wanted to kind of come up with their own sauce. Sure. And so they started designing this game, and it was called Dark Sector.
That's right.
And they went to bring it to market, and at the time they could not get anyone to jump on board with their game. All the publishers were like, you know, the whole space, like, third-person shooter thing's just not really popular right now. I don't think we can back it. And Digital Extremes, like, had to kind of manipulate the game and turn it from, like, a space ninja to, like, a marine or something. And people were even going as far to say, like, their main character was too feminine, that he needed an eye patch, and, like, all this other garbage, and, like, completely changed the game around and released it. And it took a while. It gained a little bit of traction, but it really wasn't, like, super successful.
Right.
So they took the idea that they were originally wanting for Dark Sector and came up with Warframe. And that is where I'll leave it up to you.
Which you know what? I had I had understood that I'm sorry, everyone. Oh my goodness.
You heard it first, people. Brain fart live on stream.
I didn't know that he had the background in the pinball games and the sort of kind of nature that you would expect from Warframe, as it is a free to play game. It's very much sort of sitting in that. I definitely wouldn't call it a casual game.
No, it's by no means a casual.
But it's definitely sitting under those same kind of guiding principles. And in terms of the way it's produced. We'll get into some of that, but yeah. So I guess the main point of note about Warframe is that it's a grind fest. It's a collectathon, a grind box, if you will. It is. It's all about the loot, a loot and shoot.
Yeah, if you've ever played Borderlands, you know that like getting loot is the only way you can get the best equipment, the best of everything. Warframe is that times 100.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one thing that this game is noted for, particularly as a negative, is the amount of grind involved. And honestly, it's the kind of thing where if you're wondering whether or not this game is for you, that's the first test. That's the main test of the barrier. If you can get past the grind, then you'll enjoy Warframe. But if you can, then, well, there you go.
Matt has it right down in chat. He said grinding for loot all day, every day. And that is the God honest truth, man. Like I said, I'm 160 hours in, and like I might be a little over halfway done with the star chart and nowhere near like towards the end game.
And that's one of the things too. Like a lot of people talk about the space, or they talk about the combat. They talk about the parkour abilities. They talk about the story, the heavily involved story, the crazy amounts of lore. But honestly, at its heart and center and its real focus, with all of that included, is just this grindy game where you just collect loot. And I gotta tell you, usually this kind of game doesn't work for me. I like them. I love collecting. It's actually part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Borderlands 2, I actually did manage to beat Borderlands, the original, but with Borderlands 2, I keep getting stopped around the same point where I just put myself in all these activities, and I keep flushing out at about the same point where it's like, I just can't go any, like I lose the interest, I guess. And I think I fully expected that Warframe would be the same for me. Not to mention add on all the player, all the gating in there. All the plat purchasing, all the kinds of things. Plat is the game's is the in-game currency that can be paid with real money.
And I just want to clarify, this game isn't pay to win.
Sure.
But I do have a little gripe with that whole plat system. A lot of things that you want to get in-game are only purchasable by plat, such as color palettes for your Warframe and ship and all of that.
Slots.
Yeah, weapon slots, Warframe slots. Granted, I think you gain those with Mastery rank, which is like your level in-game.
You know what? I don't think you do. I haven't gained a single Mastery slot. And granted, I'm only at Mastery 8, I think. But what you gain is loadout slots.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's right.
As far as I know, the only way to gain slots for your Warframes and so in other words, unless you're buying Warframes with plat, because whenever you do that, they will give you the slot that it comes in. If you're going to buy the blueprint and make the Warframe, which is the other way to get your hands on it, you have to have a slot for it to go to. Mm-hmm. So kind of the main concept of this game of collecting Warframes is somewhat gated by plat, which there are ways to get your hands on it, even in game, even beyond paying money.
Yeah. There's ways you can sell some of your equipment and gain that in-game currency.
Well, you can trade with other players. Yeah. You can basically just keep cycling that secondhand plat around.
And there are players that have been through just about every frame, every weapon, and they haven't paid a dime towards it.
And you really don't need to per se, but the main point is that it just makes a long game with so much grind even longer, even grindier.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the nature of it. But despite the fact that you have not only the fact that this is a collectathon, that this is a loot and shoot, that the whole point of the game is just to collect and collect and collect, plus all of these free-to-play principles on top of it. I've still hung in there. I would say I can't quite explain it, except I think I have a theory. I actually think that gating, that things like you have a foundry where you can make warframes or weapons or various items in the game. Of course, making them requires resources plus time, real world time, days or sometimes multiple days, sometimes just a few hours. It just depends, obviously, or of course. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes you can't get your hands on the next thing until you wait. The game makes you wait.
Yeah.
Unless you have plat. Unless you have that platinum. There's things like mastery rank, which certain weapons, some warframes are locked by mastery rank, and you can't utilize them until you've gained the points, which basically the way you gain points is just by leveling up weapons and warframes.
Yeah, essentially. And
there's no actual platinum way around that. You just have to even if you order a bunch of weapons, you still have to put the time in. You still have to put the time in to
it's turning into a rapper
to level these things up. Alerts come every so often. You can trade potentially for some of the mods and some of the items you would get, but otherwise I think things like Nitane extract, for example, special resources, the only way to get your hands on it is to be there when it happens. And I honestly think that the reason for this, beyond there's some obvious tactics in terms of getting you to pay money and to stick with it and be involved with Warframe, but I think that by making you wait, by keeping you from certain things at certain times, it makes you draw your attention elsewhere. It keeps you from throwing yourself into this and doing this over and over and then getting bored and leaving. You're constantly having to shuffle between various activities. Of course, there are a ton of things to do in the game. There's always something to work towards. So when you can't work towards this thing, you just have to work towards something else, of which there's always going to be something.
Yeah, there's always something to level up. There's always a alert to do. There's always like special missions you can do. The game truly does, like, as grindy as it is, it really does do a really good job of, like, the high-end players are never going to have nothing to do. So,
well, and that's something, I mean, I guess we can talk about that.
We don't have to jump through it.
Okay.
We can go, however.
Okay. Well, that is true, though, is that there's maybe some question about that too. I've seen a lot of complaints on that end, but we'll get around to it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I honestly think that's why I've stuck with it, is because the game's really good at shuffling you along and keeping you active in things to do, but also keeping you from being a danger to yourself. And which is, it's kind of counterintuitive. Borderlands 2, you're not restricted. You can do anything you want to do as long as you have access to it. But because of that, you may burn yourself out doing things it may be better for you not to do, to take your time. I've played through more of the main story than I generally play through in games like this because, well, that was there to do and I had to wait. I couldn't go ahead and do this. So, or maybe I was trying to do this one thing, and while I was doing this, I could go ahead and do that. I like to save the main story from last, but this kept me sort of on a path and keeps me going through, various things. So I just...
Yeah. And like, and we've been able to keep up with this and learn how to play and like continue to grind, even though like the game really does not tell you how to play.
Yeah.
which I think kind of leads us into our next bullet point here, and that's like just the awful conveyance that the game has with the player.
Awful. Terrible.
Like it'll tell you your basics, like how to run, how to jump, how to shoot, like make sure they die and you don't. But the rest of it, you have to kind of wiggle your way through and find out. A lot of it is in like different tutorials that are in the game that are extra and not even told to you like that they're there. A lot of it is like off the Wiki page, and
see, and that's the thing. Like it's organization. It's weird because it seems like there's some places of the game that are so well organized, and then others that are just horrendous. It's just so little is conveyed to the player of what to do next, and generally it's fine to have a little bit of a that gap for the player to learn, but there's sort of a subtlety to keeping that information available and at hand, and so that players know where to go for it, and at the same time still allow them to figure out. One of the easiest ways, one of the easiest ways to point that out is that in the beginning I was really confused about the menu system, and it sounds stupid, but I'm not the only one.
No.
It's because there's so many various menus, and it's not streamlined. You don't know where to go to find this stuff. It took me a while, not a long time, but a while, to figure out that how to buy blueprints.
Yeah.
How to get access to some of the stuff without paying plat. I kept going on the market, and I see these plat prices, and I'm like, oh, well, obviously I can't put credits here, so there must be something else, and I must just not have found it yet, or it was confusing. Which, I guess, well, not to the game's credit, so to speak, but to Warframe's credit, to the player base that it's enabled, or that it's been able to attract. They've provided a fairly comprehensive wiki. It's not always the best. There are some blind spots here and there.
And a lot
but
of
it does
times,
a hell of a lot better than the game tends to.
Yeah, and with the wiki page, like what you've got to watch out for is this game is so consistently patched and hotfixed and updated.
Yeah.
A lot of times if you Google like X problem in Warframe, you might get a post from like 2016. And, like, that's been hundreds of fixes ago.
Yeah.
And, like, that aspect of the game may not even work that same way. I mean, there were several times, like, kind of just weird video stuff. Not the game's fault, but setting it up on my side that, like, I had to Google how to do. And, like, I was getting these horrendously old posts, but overall, like, if you have a question regarding, how is this weapon, a lot of times the wiki page will kind of tell you, like, base stats, like how people normally load out the mods, which, like he was saying with the menu system, you start off your journey, and almost immediately you're greeted with the mod screen. Like, you will end up there. And it is so complex. There are so many stats. Like, it's not your basic, like, attack, defense, like, magic sort of thing. Like, you have all these different stats, and then you have stuff like your spin attack, your wall jump, your base damage, reload speed, all of that. And then you have your slash, puncture, and impact stats, and each weapon will have different of those, and each of those attributes will affect certain enemies differently, and you can proc these stats to where, like, you primarily deal that damage, and you can manipulate stats, and, like, there's different attributes you can add, such as, like, fire, explosion, acid.
Sure.
Like, it's so just in your face and like daunting.
It is a that is true.
And
it's
that's
a complex
just modding.
combat system that's that isn't necessarily explained the best way. But it's just sometimes it's just simple stuff. Like there are quests where you have to do something, such as scan a enemy, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's just the information's there, but it's not clear. The information there, but it's not clear. It's not coherent. It's not something you're used to. And nothing is generally hard in this game. It's just figuring out how to do it. And then afterwards, you look at it and you go, oh, okay. But the player should never really have to do that. Work a little bit at it, sure, to understand. But it shouldn't be a constant tribulation to try to figure out what the game is instructing you and asking you to do. And it is just the nature, for some reason, of Warframe. And it just tends to be terrible at explaining new things to you that hasn't yet been installed, I guess.
Yeah, and
but it is, all of this bad conveyance is absolutely counterbalanced by a really fanatical, but because of that, a really devoted and passionate community.
The community and free-to-play games normally do not have good communities in them. I don't know if you all have ever played League of Legends or like Dota, but those are some toxic communities. I joke all the time. Sorry, I'm trying to get comfortable here. I joke all the time that I've never been told so many times to kill myself by so many 12-year-olds. Like, it's ridiculous. But Warframe, it's like you have a question, people legitimately want to help you out, and they don't want to spoil the game for you in doing so. And, like, that's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that it is another point of credit to Warframe is that it is it's a game that offers both solo and multiplayer options. You can absolutely play this game all by yourself, no problem. But it is a lot of fun together with other people, and there are definitely people willing to. They have some devoted chats sections online where you can ask for help, and you'll almost always get some feedback from what I hear. To be honest, I haven't used the feature, but also there are just tons and tons of Reddits of answering simple questions on this game, and this, I mean, obviously there's some toxicity here and there, and you expect it, but the surprise is just how much legitimate help there actually is for this game of people wanting to help out there. It's just to its credit though, it actually really balances that solo and multiplayer. Maybe not Conclave, that's the PvP. I've only heard stories, I haven't even touched it.
Yeah, I heard that's a cluster.
But just PvE, you can play this game solo, and you can play this game with other people or with friends, and it seems to be either way a pretty balanced experience, which is rare.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I really feel like even when me, you, and Matt jump into a game together, like, the difficulty scaling and everything is pretty on spot. Like, it doesn't get... Like, Borderlands is a good example where if you're doing raid bosses and you have 4 people, that boss is going to be tough. Unless, like, you have all OP8 equipment and it's, like, the best spec equipment. Warframe, I feel like, ups the difficulty enough to where if you have a teammate that just runs off and is doing their own thing, like, you feel the pressure, but it doesn't just, like, completely mow you down and is unforgiving. Plus the game itself, like, plays really well for multiplayer.
Yeah.
Like, it has a good feel to it. Like, it wasn't an afterthought.
No.
That they actually had this in mind from the get-go.
In fact, that's a good way to put it. I mean, argumentatively, this game was built for multiplayer. But despite that, you can also play it solo and not get wrecked. I mean, you can make it through just fine.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit earlier about like some of the mods and customizations that you can do. This is one of my favorite parts of Warframe, and that is the customization. Like, there are so many different frames. I forgot the number off the top of my head, but each frame has custom skins. They have custom helmets. You can put capes on them, like these tattoo-looking things. All of your weapons, you can customize colors. I mean, a lot of people joke that since Warframe doesn't really have a like end game, that the end game is just to have the best looking Warframe.
Fashion frame.
Yes, fashion framing as the community calls it. They actually talked about that in the no clip.
You know what though? See, it goes even further in that Warframe specifically set up a system where there are some tiers of weapons. There are certainly some weapons that outclass others. And the same goes for Warframes. But for the most part, even up into the high-end stuff, for the most part, any frame, any weapon will get you through if you mod it right.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that you can basically play any weapon you like if it feels good and you enjoy it. And to essentially get over the idea of not having better weapons, of not having that difficulty scale, is that it does scale. But it's through mods that you can make better equipment. Yeah. Even out of a weapon that was weaker can be much stronger with better mods. So there is a lot of versatility in that sense. But in some ways, I almost think that the modding system is kind of restricting. I mean, in theory, and it's just kind of the nature of it. But in theory, you can sort of put on a setup any way you want. Obviously, there are setups that work better, but there really are some set mod styles that work to the point where, like, you'll look up builds, and pretty much most builds for a weapon will have fairly like dedicated positions. You can put up to 8 mods on a weapon slot, and most of the time, at least 5 or 6 of those will be locked. And so at best you get, maybe a couple mods that you can sort of choose to change the utility of your weapon.
Yeah, and like a lot of times with modding, you'll find that you never want to bring up weaknesses in weapons. A lot of times you find yourself strictly modding the strengths of the weapon, and you just interchange the weapon according to the strength to fight whatever it is that you're going to be fighting, any of those like enemy races.
Sure. And it's a system that works.
Yeah,
You in that way, you're able to use any kind of weapon, any kind of frame you want. And that's the idea, I think.
Yeah, that's how really any kind of like modding works. It's always easier to work on the strengths of something rather than the weaknesses.
But it does kind of, if you want the best build, it does kind of limit you in that sense.
Yeah,
then.
Yeah. And like a lot of times the biggest thing you'll find yourself being restricted by is resources.
Yeah.
This game is very, very RNG dependent.
Oh yeah.
And where the maps load out, and on the maps you will have clusters of different resources, and if you attack them, you gain the resource. John over here, when I started out, like, was forever finding Morphics and stuff like that. I ended up wasting like my first plat you're initially given to like buy Morphic so I can get a different weapon. And if I would have waited like 2 more planets, I was and still am drowning in Morphics.
Yeah. There are some resources that are just hard to get your hands on, but Morphics aren't. Neural sensors.
Yeah, neurodes are a pain to get. Like, I have so many pieces of equipment that I could be building right now, but I just don't have the neurodes to build.
I haven't found that. I mean, there are, I mean, they're definitely a resource that's hard to come by. Although there are some other locations you can get them. Run more Derelict.
Yeah. All you gotta do is just run Derelict.
But I'll tell you what, this game is definitely really RNG. And it's not surprising for a game like this that it would be.
It's got to be.
But it's extra in some places, because unlike some games where every location has a unique setting, it's based on missions. That's how the game runs. And so you're running a certain set of missions. You'll have the same mission type come up every time. Or you'll have the same kind of mission types keep cycling through, and you'll have the same tile sets you keep cycling through. I mean, certain locations will have different types of tile sets. Generally, most planets are either a Grenier planet or a Corpus planet. They're individual to a certain faction, but you'll keep seeing the repeats of the same types of levels you've already been running, because they essentially run on an RNG tile set. That roguelike sort of where they just mix up the rooms a little bit, but you're seeing the same thing again and again, and it adds exponentially to all the grind you have to do. You just see these same locations again and again and again and again.
Yeah. And that's kind of a great point for me. And I understand that the tile set, like, there can only be so many tile sets in the game, or else the game would be like terabytes large.
Yeah.
Which,
by the way, potentially a way they're counteracting that is by adding in those open world sections, which will still get repetitive, but at least it's something new that you haven't seen before. At least for sort of the expert players that have been stuck with the same tile sets over and over and over.
Yeah, and later on into the game, they and what John's talking about, you have 2 locations now. You have Plains of Eidolon, which I think was released a year and a half ago.
It would have been 2018. It was right before we started playing, so...
And then...
It was at the end of the year?
Maybe like... Actually, it was right when I started playing. They introduced Fortuna, and with that update, you gain another open world section. I can't remember the name of it. Yes, Orvalis. But yeah, so and with that, that's how they keep trying to make things fresh. Is like they add all these different things. For Christ's sake, you can fish in the game.
Yeah.
You can ride a skateboard, like hoverboard, in the game. There's just so many different like things to do. You can buy colors and hair patterns for your Kubro, which is your dog, and things like that.
Yeah, the game it absolutely relies on its base of players that have set it up.
Yeah.
So they can't do things that would straight up alienate those players. At the same time, of course, the game wants to gain new players, which I think it's been somewhat successful with its
been
open
highly
world.
Successful.
But the fact of the matter is that if you can't, the open worlds, they're kind of neat and because they're new and there's something else to do. But if you couldn't get over the grind, if you played this early on when it first came out and you gave up on it and then you came back for the open world, it's not enough that would actually hold you on to the game.
Yeah, and a little bit of like business perspective with this. This is kind of what I picked up after watching the documentary. At one point, they're talking about how do you retain people and still bring in new players. Well, what that along with some other things kind of hinted to me, like they didn't design this game for the new player. This game is designed for the person who's going to play it for 1,000 hours. Because after all, the person who plays it for 1,000 hours, you know, even if once a quarter they throw in like $20 here, $40 there to buy to buy like this prime vaulted Warframe that you can only get for a certain amount of time, those people are going to be the people that keep the money coming. The new players, normally, like, your average game is going to be anywhere between, like, I'd say 6 to 8 hours to complete, like, a main, like, campaign. Total, people might put, like, 40 into a game, and then they'll move on. Like I said in the very beginning, I'm 160 hours in, and I just hit the second piece of juicy, like, campaign in the game. This game really, really is designed for the long haul.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's what ends up, there's always a separation between new players and old players in that meta game, but it's even more so here than elsewhere. I just think because of the grand size of the game and how much content's actually in it.
Yeah, like
there is an argument by some players that there's no end game, essentially.
Yeah, but the game's in beta.
Forever.
Well, at this point, they could never release Warframe as an actual game. It's been free to play for so long, and so many players have invested so much money into it. This game's married to free to play. The only way that they would be able to do this is take all the aspects and launch a completely different title. Because if it's remotely close to like Warframe, people aren't going to be cool with that.
Well, and I mean, there's no reason they couldn't maintain the free-to-play status and push it past the beta into a completed stage. You've seen PlanetSide. You've seen...
Yeah, that's true.
But the fact of the matter is that it at least seems that having that beta status is kind of a crutch, where people can say, you can go, oh, this isn't right. And it's like, oh, it's in beta. That's why it's so... Why is it so glitchy? What is going on here? So it's in beta. It's in beta.
Yeah.
What do you want? It's in beta.
Something always happens when we're playing together, and like John will be like, "Oh, God, this thing," and I'm like, "Bro, it's free to play."
Right, Matt? Right?
Right? How many
you remember
times
Uranus?
have I said that? Oh Lord, Uranus is so bad. So, once you get to Uranus, you get to an interesting aspect of the game that it's been introduced to you prior to this. Yeah. It's called the Arcwing. And oh boy, do I hate the freaking Arcwing.
Terrible. Awful.
Oh, it's so bad. But
and you know, it's funny because the Arcwing makes sense. It's in its purest sense, it's basically space battles. Which kind of makes sense for
you're
a game
space freaking ninja doll. Of course you would be fighting in outer space.
And it makes sense that people really like it. But and you said you think maybe you have an understanding of this. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the implementation, but it just does not, it seems so wonky. It just does not seem to work well.
Okay, you want to know how you fix the Arcwing?
Okay.
The biggest problem with the Arcwing is that in-game, your like distance meters and everything make it seem like you're going really, really, really fast. After all, you're fighting in outer space. You have rockets attached to you. You're running. That's basically your movement speed. That's your attack speed with your melee speed is the same as it is in a actual spaceship as it is outside. the Arcwing battles are so slow going because there is actually no movement difference.
Yeah.
So how you would fix this is make it like a dogfight. You know, Ace Combat, you're in jets. You're constantly flying around. You're trying to, like, keep the enemy in your crosshairs. And it's very, very fast-paced, and you're always, like, on the move. Whereas here, a lot of times they're interception missions where you have to, like, defend location, capture it, defend location, capture it. And you're running along outer space. You finally get to your destination. You sit there for a minute. You capture it, kill a couple enemies, basically run over to the next one. However, in a dogfight, you should be able to get there in a matter of seconds and then have to dogfight your way through and then move on to the next location a few seconds later.
That's right.
Shouldn't have to linger.
The technical distance doesn't change. It's the theoretical distance that's changing. This used to be 100 meters, but now technically it's 1,000 meters. Well, that's a bit extreme, but that is what it. Yeah, and that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but you're right.
Yeah, and I understand you're in outer space. You're kind of floating around, like, but no, like, you are so advanced in technology, like, you have rocket boosters attached to you. Make it feel fast.
Yeah, that's probably
the
point.
If that was the case and you weren't so centered on capturing locations, but rather, I'd rather do exterminate missions in outer space.
Which you can, by the way.
You can. And I would rather do, like, dogfights into like blowing up reactor cores and stuff to, like, self-destruct ships. Like, make it a space fighter and not just, like, any other portion of the game.
Which, of course, they're trying to integrate the general. I mean, they don't want to stray too far from it being Warframe. They want it to look like Warframe, and it's centered around the same general mechanics they have sit in. Right? They just have to extract them a little or work on them a little bit for the Arcwing. But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for Christ's sake, they're coming up with entire open world planets you can explore. Like, these are just set tile pieces, and a lot of times they're almost identical.
I mean the way the character moves in Arcwing is essentially the same way the character moves.
Yeah,
it's
it's identical.
Which is why you get that instead of getting, just a spaceship to fly around in, which would be the first thing that comes to mind. But
give me Star Fox.
But yeah, I also didn't mean to cut you off. Glitchy, Arcwing, Uranus.
Yes. Oh boy, is it glitchy. Yeah, Uranus, a lot of times they incorporate underwater sections, and again, you get the same, like, floaty game mechanics you get in outer space. The only difference is now you have water sound effects and water visuals.
And the game encourages you, well, not just encourages, requires you to traverse between the submersible locations and actual on foot locations.
Yeah, trust to mix it up on you, which is a good thing in theory. The only problem with is a lot of times you find yourself, like, clipping into locations or clipping out of the map, and suddenly you're, like, in a dark space and can't escape. Matt, you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what he's talking about because that happened to me. And it was so upsetting. And part of the reason is because it was one of the I think it was the third time. I shut the game off at that point. It was the third time where I tried to do a Uranus submersible level, and some sort of glitch impeded me from completing the level. And that was the one. Something sucks you up. And there's features where you go out of bounds in the games, so it sort of the screen goes black and then it pulls you back.
Yeah.
This was the same kind of concept, except the game gets confused because you're underwater and it keeps putting you back in the same location, and you just keep going out of bounds, out of your control. Can't swim away, can't move it out, and then when you try to mess with it, at some points your screen just goes black.
And we actually ran into this problem last night. We were doing a mobile defense mission in which you have to guard a computer while it's being hacked. And if we touched the floor tile in which the computer was in contact with, it would out of bounds you and teleport you hella far away from
It's like 200 meters. It was ridiculous.
And like you'd have to ninja your way through a couple rooms. The funny thing is, it was doing it to the enemies as well. So like it was the easiest defense mission, and plumb up until like the last 15 seconds when all the enemies caught up and we had a room full of baddies and couldn't kill them fast enough. But we survived. But
don't worry, it's okay.
I found too that a lot of times the glitches are frame rate dependent.
Okay.
When the game starts to bog down is when I notice more glitching. Because I think the physics engine that's inside of Warframe, same concept people were finding with PUBG, was that if you had a faster frame rate, then your fire rate increased. So I think it's kind of the same concept where the game gets confused. You should be at X location, but you're lagging a few frames behind. So it just kind of dumps you in limbo. And like it constantly tries to respawn you, but it doesn't know where to put you.
Yeah. And also an unfortunate nature of the RNG elements in this game is that they tend to compile upon that glitchiness.
Yeah.
You just some, especially in Uranus, but sometimes you just go into certain levels knowing that they have a tendency to glitch. Sometimes they're fine, and then sometimes they're just horrendous, and you're constantly going to missions going, please.
Yeah, I remember pretty much every time we'd launch a Uranus mission, John would be like, like you could just hear him sigh in the background. But
there's that one defense mission on Earth that just refuses to not.
I stopped doing it. So what ended up happening with me was like defense missions. You have to kill all the enemies, and then the next wave comes. While you defend this like cryopod. Well, what was happening was the enemies would clip in between crates that were on the map, and you'd have to go and find them and kill them between the crate, or they'd fall off the freaking map entirely, but they wouldn't die because there was no like kill zone where they would fall down and pass through and it would just kill them. So they would just fall down, down. You'd have to abort the mission because you'd never be able to kill them.
And it's
in beta. It's in beta. What are you expecting? But yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So we gotta move us along a little bit here.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think we could probably skip mission types.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's just go straight into bosses.
Okay.
Yeah. So bosses. That's probably another grieving point for me in this game. A lot of times you have a lot of build up going into the boss. Like they trash talk you the entire time like you're getting to them, and then you walk up and just obliterate them.
There's a heavy lack of consolidation with the difficulty of bosses. You have bosses like the Sergeant, who is basically just a slightly advanced form. And honestly, I think he hasn't been reworked in a while, and he needs it. But
yeah, he is broken.
he's basically just an advanced form of an enemy unit. But then of course you have bosses like Vahek, who
Vahek is stupid.
It's a scenario where he's invulnerable for a period of time with a very small hit window. It'll open and close, and they also combine that same type 2 with he retreats. So you got to fight him like 3 times in the level, and then finally get to the main part where he does the same thing he's been doing. he opens his very small hit window and then closes it for a time. And it's a matter of slowing down the game. It takes the control out of the player's hands. It's a very common boss type of mechanism.
Yeah.
But the problem with this in a game like Warframe is that you will continuously do these same bosses again and again to get those parts. And so basically, a lot of times you're just sitting there waiting on the boss to cycle to the next, and it just further exasperates on that.
Yeah, and the boss fights, like, they feel very anticlimactic. Like,
Yeah, that is true.
a lot of times they just have buffed up versions of common enemies tactics. Like the first boss you fight,
Jackal?
Yeah, I guess he is like the first boss.
Oh, all right.
You fight
Captain Vor.
Yeah, you fight Vor, but that's more like they kind of guide you through the first quest, and he's not.
I would argue that Vor is your first, and he's not difficult. He's not difficult.
No, he's not hard
and
at
all.
all.
To be fair, none of the bosses truly are.
No. Once you and the game is all about figuring out the boss's tactic.
Right.
Once you get their kind of rhythm of how they do things down, like you'll start noticing like animations they're doing, and you're like, oh well, he's gonna do this, so I'm just gonna like go over here until his hitbox opens up.
Which makes sense. I mean, this is the kind of thing you'd expect playing, say, a platformer.
If you ever play Mega Man,
Right.
like, it's all about memorization.
The problem, I think the reason it doesn't work well here is twofold. But one is that this game doesn't, again, it has a bad time with conveyance. It's not clear always exactly how to, it's generally a simple matter. And if you just pay attention and you do it over and over again, you'll figure out what you're missing. But I think it's just because the game is already so repetitive that it feels like a drudge to figure out the boss's weak points, which it shouldn't. It should feel fun. It should feel exciting. And it doesn't tend to. It feels like you're like, I can't get this out. And then you look it up and you're like, oh. And I don't know. It just feels like a waste of time rather than an enjoyable experience. And I don't know.
Yeah, and like some of that frustration also kind of goes over into the common enemies. There's a lot of knockdown in this game. That's like its biggest like.
I'll tell you what, playing the Rhino, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. so my frame is a glass cannon, in the fact that I need to be in my fourth ability constantly in order to really be effective, and that burns up energy. So once I'm out of energy, I have to go into manual mode and just like good old fashioned shoot them in the face till they die. And when that happens, I'm vulnerable or more vulnerable to knockdown and all these other things. Like you have several things listed out here in the doc. One of which that really catches my eye is the bombards and the shockwave moas. Like, golly, these guys are so annoying.
And the heavy gunners do it too.
Yeah, and also like the whip drags that like the ancients and some of the other people do. Like you'll be fighting along, suddenly you get knocked down, you're dragged like halfway across the tile, and you're like, what the heck, guy? And the most frustrating part is I wouldn't feel as bad if, like, when they dragged me to them, if they just, like, clobbered me. But no, they drag me to them and they look at me. Like, I get up and it's just, like, 3 seconds before they start animating to attack. And you're just like...
Gives you a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, well, you're dead now.
And obviously that's more of a, it's just, there's some, it's just a, I think it's fair. I think most of it's pretty fair, honestly. It's irritating.
Yeah.
The Corpus seem to love, that faction loves to put out irritation after irritation. Nothing that they don't put out formidable enemies. They just put out ones that piss you off.
But I mean, you do got to think like you're a space ninja. Like you're moving through these maps really, really fast.
That's a good point.
And the biggest tactic to kind of disrupt that is slow down. So they knock you down. It takes you 3 seconds to get back up. I don't think it's quite that much. It's probably like 2 seconds. But they're consistently trying to slow you down. Because that's going to throw you off your rhythm.
Which mechanically is frustrating. In a game that's built on speed, then you have sections where you're forced to go slower because you have to deal with enemies that slow you down.
But I'll tell you what, it's effective. It's an easy mechanic to implement, but it's effective. Like there's nothing worse than if you're speedrunning Mario and you're big Mario and you make a mistake and now you've got those frames where you're switching to small Mario. You're like bloop, bloop, bloop. And then you have to run across. When you hit that stop point, you're just like, oh, that drives me insane.
Yeah, but that's a special attribute to that game. Ordinarily, you slow down a little bit, no big deal. Because in Mario, it's not necessarily going fast.
If you're speedrunning,
this isn't Sonic. Yeah, if you're speedrunning, I'm not speedrunning Warframe. I'm just playing it.
Well, inherently, you're always speedrunning.
No,
Warframe.
I'm trying to, not with Rhino. I'm walking.
We're always waiting on John.
I walk to my objectives. Well, it seems like in this last part we've crapped on this game for a little bit. Which So I just thought I'd point out a couple of things real quick. It is getting pretty late in this stream, but
I'm good.
Just a few. I mean, those are fairly points anyway, and like I said before, most of the rest of it, if it's not hunting for loot, it all basically is frill anyway. It's a weird thing to say because I mean, generally, that's certainly counterintuitive to what you would think.
Yeah,
you would think it's all about the combat or the parkour or the story, but it's not. It's about the grind and the loot. That's the center of focus. And everything else is just a means to that end. But with that being said, those means are implemented pretty well. For example, I wouldn't say that the story is the greatest thing I've ever seen, or particularly novel, but it is very interesting.
It's very interesting.
Absolutely flips the game on its head. It contextually redefines everything, especially for those players that were playing from the beginning. It just completely redefines everything that you were doing before. Completely reestablishes what's actually going on, and it's which is a very interesting way to. It's a twist in a sense more than just an unexpected. You're observing an unexpected twist, but you end up participating in that. Then it actually changes the gameplay mechanics, and that's unique. That's interesting.
Yeah, and
even though it was all backwritten, there's also, this game is really lore intensive, by the way.
Yeah, and you have to search for the lore, and again, it's a collectathon, so you're always collecting small pieces of the big picture. Yeah. The main story I do really enjoy. It's not the most well written thing I've ever seen. It doesn't play out like how I would have done it, but honestly, for a free-to-play game, the story is actually really, really good. I've watched streams, so I know much more than where I'm currently at in the game, but honestly, it's good enough to where even though I know what's going on, like, I'm still playing it. I'm still running through the main quest, and like he said, I know it sounds like we had a lot of, like, malice towards like some of the shortcomings of this game, but one thing that I really adore about this game is the fact that there's nothing else really like it. Like, there's games that you could see attributes that maybe they pulled from, like maybe Titanfall, for some of the movements and things like that. But this game is just genuinely unique. And the art style is very unique. Like, when you're in the Grenier, like, establishments, it's almost like you get a sense of like how that race truly is. Like, they're these grotesque, like, ugly creatures, and the game's like color palette reflects that. And like and same thing with the Corpus. Like, you're in these high tech like environments, and their weaponry is very, very advanced, and it's very, I wouldn't say immersive, but it stays true to itself. It seems like what they've done has been pretty thought out, and I'm guessing so, since originally this was Dark Sector. They've had quite a few years to like implement things, and like even down to the naming of weapons and stuff like that. They have, it's almost like Warframe has its own language. Like, cats are Kavots and dogs are Kubros, and like the Grenier weapons, you have like the Seer, the Gorgon, and
there's tons of Greek mythology in this game.
Yeah, tons of it, and which actually plays really well into like the planets.
Yeah,
like you're navigating like Neptune, Uranus, like Pluto.
Potentially even some of the theming of the game. In fact, the Orokin are kind of like Greek gods, it almost seems. But
yeah,
anyway, for sure. And you mentioned movement. That is undoubtedly a fun part of this game.
That is probably the bread bringer of this game,
right,
is the movement style.
Again, I would say that it's not the crux. It is not what this game is about, so to speak. But it's definitely an integral part of its structure for sure. Bullet jumping is hugely fun. Being able to slide and then propel yourself forward like a cannonball, and then do some leaps upon a wall, latch, change your direction.
Yeah. Like, you truly feel like a space ninja in this game, and it just feels incredible. Like, the movement, and until you like clip into something you're not supposed to, it feels very fluid. Like, not like they just want you to go fast, but like they want you to like really use the environment to your advantage.
Which is a good point, and they actually did, despite the repetitive nature and the reused, tile sets and all that. There is a lot of ingenuity into these settings and environments. There's actually a large focus on puzzles and hidden rooms. Like, every tile set has a couple of rooms with some unique features that if you explore and you put some thought into, you can find some secret passages, essentially.
Yeah. And a lot of times you loot a room and you like think that's it, but if you just look up, which that sounds so simple and so stupid, but like you wouldn't believe the amount of times you're racing through a level, like fighting enemies, like getting to your objective, and you never look up. Like,
for a third-person game, they really play with mobility, and that includes verticality too.
Yeah.
There's a huge focus on it. It's not something that's typical in most games.
Yeah, and honestly, like, my favorite part of this game is just how devoted Digital Extremes is for the game. This game was their lifeline. If this game didn't work, they were going under. And since then, they have really put in the time and effort and made corrections. Like every game has mistakes. Every game maker will make mistakes, even when they're updating. It's just up to you or up to the developer if they want to be like Fallout 76 or not. But that's a different discussion. But in the No Clip documentary, they were talking about this one part in which they included you could change the fur patterns and colors of your Kubros when they introduced them, and it was basically like a lever. You hit a button and boom, randomize. And you paid plat every single time you did it. They watched a guy hit that lever over 200 times consecutively, and instead of them being like ka-ching, 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 they were sitting there like, what have we done? We've made a slot machine. And they were honestly so bothered by the fact that somebody wasted their money that bad that they actually removed that function from the game to where you don't pay plat to like randomize. And it's just stuff like that. Like, you don't hear of a lot of developers that have that conscience about them to where they see that, and instead of saying like, oh, that's dollar signs right there, that guy just hit that button 200 times, like, they actually felt compassion and kind of empathy for the guy and was just like, we need to stop this from happening. Like, like, we're not a gambling agency, like, but yeah, and just like how on top of like updating and stuff like that they are adding to the game. I know there's a lot of community pushback. They feel like the Digital Extremes doesn't do enough, but like hair's getting in the way. I need a haircut. But quite honestly, like, if you look at a lot of other games, it doesn't see attention quite like Warframe does. A lot of stuff stays broken for much, much longer. The things that are broken are much, much worse. To the point where you run into like game-breaking glitches. Granted, Warframe has some with the clipping, but like overall, like, I think the only other game I've put this much time into was Borderlands 2. And the only reason I stopped playing Borderlands 2 was I literally ran out of things to do. Like, I maxed out the character completely that I want to max out. I got the best equipment that I could get at the highest specs that I could get it. And there just wasn't anything else. Warframe, there's always going to be that consistent grind, and like, God, I love grinding in games. Like, to me, that's the most fun. Like, I love running the run and like feeling good about it and be like, all right, I'm going to get this drop this time. And you get like the worst drop ever. Like, a lot of people get discouraged by that, but like, that's a motivator for me. Like,
It's funny that you brought that up, because I thought that's our question of the week. There's some specific questions for Warframers, but I think a general one is, how much grind is too much grind?
For me,
and for you, none, apparently.
Give me the grind. Like, I want the grind. Give me grind the game, which is pretty much Warframe.
Yeah.
And that's why I love it so much. But yeah, I feel like that's a really good question, because I feel like a lot of players like just aren't into it. Like, it's a very select few, and that's why Warframe has such a devout following.
I agree.
Is because like all of them are the people that like they want to get there.
Warframe definitely appeals to a niche group of people, but it knows what kind of game it is, and it definitely embraces that. And I think because of that, that niche group is very loud. I gotta say, personally answering this question, ordinarily, I don't like grinding games. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Warframe has somehow captured my attention, but I guess maybe the best way that I think to answer it is, I don't mind the grind if it's implemented well into the mechanics and structure of the game. I think that if the game isn't so focused on the grind that it's up here all the time and it becomes repetitive and boring, or that it is focused but it somehow is able to land that focus in such a way that it doesn't overconsume you.
I probably should reiterate, like, mechanics are very important. If the game feels like garbage and plays like garbage, I'm not gonna play it.
Sure.
But yeah, like, with good mechanics and good gameplay, like, I will grind all day long. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, man, so that is like a world record, well, streaming record for us here on this podcast. Thank you all for sticking around. I think that's probably where we're going to call it quits.
Well, we'll try. I think, honestly, we'll try not to do this too often. We appreciate you for hanging in there. But that's about twice as long as we usually try to run,
we normally try to keep it like 45 to an hour just so we're not like rambling on. But like we're so passionate about this game. Like I knew this was going to be a long one. But yeah, so this has been Player Tuesday. Thank you all for sticking around. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit the like button as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this in the future as a podcast, be sure to leave a comment and let us know what you think down below or wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you are Josh Benge, smash that like button. Smash that subscribe.
Smash that like button, as well as that like button. And yeah, I'm Curtis.
I'm John.
And we will see y'all next time.
Toodles.
See ya.